Before we begin this episode, we'd like our listeners to know that this conversation includes references to suicide. If you or someone you know is experiencing suicidal thoughts or a crisis, please reach out immediately to the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800 273 8255. From the studios of the Optimism Institute, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Burke, and in every Blue Sky episode, we'll be speaking to leaders, researchers, and thinkers whose stories and insights will remind us that there is always blue sky above. Sometimes you just have to get your head above the clouds to see it. Some of our favorite Blue Sky episodes have featured people who've bounced back from some of life's biggest challenges. Those who've been dealt a bad hand but continue to play on and win. Our guest today is just this kind of person, and then some. Her name is Mary McManus, and as you'll soon hear, her personal journey is a remarkable one. Today, she's a motivational speaker, critically acclaimed author and poet, blogger, Boston Marathon finisher, and polio and trauma survivor. A bio I read of hers said this: out of the rubble of her past, Mary dug deep to discover the treasure of who she was always meant to be. Mary McManus holds a BS in Communications from Boston University, an MSW from Boston College, and many fond memories of the veterans and their families who blessed her life when she worked at the VA. And in recent months, she's become a huge supporter of this podcast and the Optimism Institute. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome Mary McManus and hope you enjoy this Blue Sky conversation with her as much as I did. Mary McManus, welcome to the Blue Sky Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Bill. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
As am I. And you've led a remarkable life, a life marked by setbacks and courage and resilience. So I'd like to go way back. You're a little girl, and tell us about your diagnosis of polio as a little girl.
So in one of the last polio epidemics, I collapsed in gym class, in kindergarten gym class. I was perfectly healthy. I did ballet, and I did have 5 vaccines, and I didn't get it from the vaccine. But my best friend's mom wasn't vaccinated. We contracted it on the same day. So I was dancing around the gym and I collapsed. I don't remember how I got home, but I do remember that the pediatrician came to the house and he did a spinal tap, which was unfortunately all too common in order to do the diagnosis. And he also did a physical exam and my neck was stiff. I was paralyzed from the shoulders down. So he suspected it was polio. The spinal tap came back, and that's where the journey begins, Bill.
And when you say you're one of the last, or there was one of the last epidemics, you were truly, so I usually don't ask my guests their age, but people can get at it. You're roughly in kindergarten at the time, and it's 1959.
Yep. So I'm 71. I'm very, very proud.
There you go. Okay. I like that. Okay. We got that out of the way.
Very, very proud.
So you were truly, I mean, the vaccine came out in 54, 55. So you really were one of the last rounds of people getting it.
Yes.
Terrible. Yeah. And so how did your life go from there? So now you're in kindergarten, you're paralyzed from the neck down. Take us from there.
So I never graduated kindergarten. Because it was the end of the year. It was in June.
Oh, wow.
So I never graduated kindergarten.
Yeah.
And I was initially, as I said, paralyzed from the neck down. To sort of add to the difficulty and the challenge, my mom was addicted to prescription pain medication.
Man.
So I often say she was more paralyzed than I was, Bill. And she couldn't care for me. I had to wait for my dad or my grandfather to come home to meet my basic needs.
Wow.
But I did feel a very strong spiritual connection despite my precarious situation. And whether it was an out-of-body experience or whether it was just my spirit feeling God's presence. But that was an incredible comfort. And that's what has carried me through my whole life. Feeling something greater than myself that was going to take care of me, this benevolent presence. So I was paralyzed initially, as I said, from the neck down. Then I started getting some movement back on my right side, and I was able to like turn the pages in my storybook, and just kind of, lay there on the couch.
Yeah.
And the March of Dimes came to our house.
Really?
And yes, this amazing. And one of the themes for my life are angels coming into my life.
Yes.
Spiritual as well as earth angels. This woman was incredible. She laid me down on the floor. She did an assessment and she asked, what we needed. And the biggest thing that I needed was to see a physiatrist and a physical therapist and to begin the process of getting my coaxing back my muscles and my nerves to begin that process. So little by little, I got some movement back, but the left side stayed weak and paralyzed much longer. So I was in a full leg brace from my ankle to my hip. And these are in the Smithsonian in an exhibit. The red polio shoes. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And a full leg brace. And I was on crutches. And I went back to school in the fall. But of course, athletics, I was a total stranger to athletics. I mean, I was lucky I was walking.
Yeah.
And little by little, Ms. Holly was my physical therapist.
Wow.
And Dr. Moskowitz was the physiatrist.
Yep.
And I didn't tell them about how horrible my home life was. I just focused on really, I mean, as a little girl, it's very impressive, I think, to soak up the love where you can get it.
Right.
So I just soaked up their love, their nourishment. Ms. Holly had me read Dr. Seuss before she read to me in the waiting area. And then she'd have me come into the treatment room. She'd take my hand and she was just amazing. And so while I was going through the painful physical therapy sessions, she would have me recite back in tandem Dr. Seuss to her.
That's great.
And invariably it was the Cat in the Hat. So they were amazing. I was with them in physical therapy until I was 13.
Wow.
They wanted to make sure that I didn't have scoliosis. They wanted to make sure that as much that could come back could come back. So they were lifelines for me as I was going through this horror at home.
So was it by the time you were 13 that you were pretty much fully mobile and functioning and the leg braces are gone and you're walking unassisted? Okay. So, but that's a really arduous, serious trail you're on. And not every, did the technologies advance? I'm thinking back to the most famous polio victim, probably FDR. And he never regained, he'd go to the hot springs and that sort of stuff. But did the techniques get better or were you lucky? Was it better for you because you were so young and you had a chance? How does that work?
I think because I was younger, now we understand it as neuroplasticity.
Right.
That the body has a chance to regenerate and to heal.
Yes.
So I think that the fact that I was younger, I did have a brilliant physical therapist and physiatrist. He actually was one of the leaders in the field of rehabbing polio patients. Amazing. So I think in that way I was lucky. And I do call myself one of the lucky ones. I didn't have to go into an iron lung bill.
Right.
And that was a blessing. I wasn't in the hospital.
Yeah.
So, and again, when we talk about optimism, those are the things that I focus on. So, so I think I was definitely one of the lucky ones. And I think it was the skill of my physical therapist. They used what's called the Sister Kenny technique. And that's where they apply hot woolen blankets to the legs in order to facilitate the physical therapy. And what I can tell you is I can't wear wool to this day.
Flashbacks? Oh, that's
I
fascinating.
just, when people buy me sweaters or anything, I say,
No
anything
thanks.
but wool. So,
Wow,
yeah,
interesting. Interesting. Okay,
yeah.
so you're 13 and you're fully mobile. And did you at that point make it straight through high school? Because I know you got your college degree and became a social worker. So were you on a
Yeah.
pretty good path after that?
As good as I could be.
Sure, given the
I
home.
physically, I wasn't, but mentally, intellectually, I was my high school valedictorian.
Really?
Uh, yeah, yeah. My dad was alcoholic,
Wow.
and my mother, because she was out of it, would provoke him, and it was
Terrible.
horrible. But school and academics
Yes.
were my saving grace. I had some wonderful teachers, guidance counselors. I did have an incredible camp experience actually when I
Huh.
was 11,
Okay.
and had a camp counselor who was an earth angel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he really instilled in me the heart of a champion by encouraging me to compete in the end of the year Camp Olympics.
Wow.
And I thought he was crazy because I'm like, I just have polio, Joe. I don't know what you expect me to do here.
Yeah.
And he worked with me one on one. So that was my one experience with anything athletic that was just so positive. And because there were only 3 swimmers who were going to swim in the butterfly, um, I came in third and I
Wow.
got a plaque. And
Wow. Wow.
so that was a core memory, Bill, and it was wonderful. But yeah, no, I made it through high school. My dad ended his life by suicide when I
Oh,
was 17,
yeah.
right before I went off to BU. And
Unbelievable.
I just knew that I had to go. I knew I had to
Yeah.
start college.
Yeah.
And I had a really good RA at BU, and she referred me to the counseling center because when I first got to Boston, I couldn't stop crying. It was
Sure.
just like
Ah,
everything came out from
sure.
all the years. But I had good counseling. I got
Yep.
into groups, and I really loved my BU experience.
As we've emphasized so many times on this show, it's helpful to reflect on history to remind ourselves of the many ways in which we're fortunate to be alive today in the 2020s. It wasn't all that long ago when little kids were being struck down by polio in this country. In Mary's case, it was in kindergarten gym class. And adding to this tragedy, her mom was addicted to pain meds and unable to help her afflicted daughter. And this is where Mary describes the first of many angels coming into her life. The March of Dimes, the amazing physical therapists, all came to her aid. And as she reflects on these challenging experiences, Mary's able to describe herself as one of the lucky ones, emphasizing that so many others with polio had it worse than she did. Fortunately for Mary, she was a strong student, and after getting back into school, went on to be her high school valedictorian before heading off to college. But tragedy continued to follow her, with her father taking his own life, and yet Mary continued to persevere. Getting back to our conversation, I asked Mary how she thought about her eventual career while she was in college.
I worked in the college counseling center, and the director of the counseling center said, "You have a real gift with the students. Have you thought about what you want to do next?" And I said, "I kind of like public relations." "No, not really." And he suggested that I go for a degree in the counseling field. So I went to Boston College and I got my MSW, and I met my husband on a blind date,
All right.
which is really cool.
Yeah.
And we had twins uh, when I was working. Well, I had to leave my job. I was working at a private psychiatric hospital, and I had to go out early on maternity leave. And then I went back to work after my twins were 2, and worked at the VA.
Yes.
And I worked there for almost 20 years until the next chapter.
Yes. So let's pause there because as you tell the story of your childhood and these incredibly impactful adults outside of your home, I'm seeing, knowing what you've done with the rest of your life, I'm seeing a lot of seeds being planted. Dr. Seuss and poetry, these incredible physical therapists and the kind of social work you wind up doing, the RA experience, the count. So seems like a lot of those things were being formed. Was it that treatment that you got as a young person, you think, that led you towards social work? And I'm curious to know if the VA was a conscious decision that that's where you wanted to be, or did you just have a response to veterans, or can you explain that to us?
Sure. I think that those early experiences of being cared for
Yeah.
and nurtured definitely informed my ultimate career choice, that I really wanted to find a way to help others who'd been through trauma.
Yep.
The VA, I did an internship there
Okay.
during my graduate studies. So I did my internship, and I just loved working with the veterans.
Sure.
I had this place in my heart. It was also when the veterans were just returning from Vietnam. And the woman who got the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder recognized was one of my mentors
Really?
at the VA.
Oh,
Yes,
wow.
Sarah Haley.
Oh, wow.
So during my internship, I knew that at some point I'd really like to work at the VA. And
Fascinating.
so initially, I worked in an adolescent school, and then I did inpatient psychiatry, and the universe just kind of moved me along. And then after my twins were born, I knew that the VA would give me the flexibility
Yes.
to do both. They also had childcare available,
Yep.
and I just felt drawn there.
Oh, and the need was so tremendous with veterans coming back from Vietnam. I mean, just the PTSD and the physical injuries and the no parades in the streets when you came home from fighting in Vietnam. Quite the opposite in some cases, where the people's distaste for the war was actually taken out on the veterans, which
veterans.
always seemed
Yeah.
misplaced to me. This is jumping ahead a little bit, but it's 2006, I believe, when you're diagnosed with post-polio syndrome.
Yes.
Can you that you are the first time I've heard of that, and can you talk about what that is and what that was like to get that news in 2006? So we're talking 50 years after you were almost 50 years after you were first diagnosed with polio.
Yes. So I started having symptoms of being tired, of chronic pain. The limp from polio came
Mm.
back,
Ah,
and I just noticed all these different physical things happening in my body. But being a type A personality, and also, um, not really being connected to my body,
yeah.
I just soldiered on for about 10 years until it reached the point where I said, whoa, I've got to figure out what's wrong here. And I knew about post polio syndrome from my surgeon did reconstructive leg surgery. And while I was there for a post op visit, he had a veteran and his wife in the office. She had post polio syndrome
Ugh.
and needed help with her husband.
Huh.
So this is very typical of me, Bill, where I'm there to get my post-op visit,
Yeah.
and here I am doing social work.
Right.
But I feel very blessed that I did that, because
Yeah.
it helped her get her surgery and get some relief. And it's also how I learned about post-polio syndrome. So when I started having all these symptoms, and my primary care doctor said, oh, it's post-traumatic stress disorder, it's empty nest syndrome. I said, my kids are still living at home.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have PTSD, but I think there's something more going on.
Yeah.
So I Googled it, Bill, and I found out that there was a clinic, and it's called a diagnosis of exclusion. So I went through a thorough evaluation, and then I was referred I got a new primary, and they took like 10 tubes of blood just to see, was there anything else going on? And as it turned out, the only test that was abnormal was something called a muscle function test.
Ah.
And that was something that, confirmed that this was the diagnosis. But there's really no test. I had muscle function. It's called an EMG. It's very painful.
Yeah.
Which showed that there were residual effects of polio.
Mm.
And so they told me that it was a progressive neuromuscular disease. And this was the belief at the time, based on how polio survivors were presenting and how the disease was progressing.
Right.
So I got the diagnosis. I went back into a toe-up leg brace. I used a cane. At times, I used a wheelchair for mobility. And I was told to either adapt my Cape House or move to a ranch, to quit my award-winning social work career because the stress was only going to add to the progression of the disease. And I used a wheelchair like to do grocery shopping or whatever. I went through OT, PT, speech. They said I might need a feeding tube because my swallowing function from the original polio virus was affecting my ability to swallow. So I was getting chronic respiratory infection. I mean, the list goes on and on. But one of the things that they did was that they referred me to a pain management specialist, Dr. Elab. I call him my master magician because when he saw my MRI of the neck, he said, "This is a slam dunk. We can take care of this pain." And I was like, "What? I can get pain relief? This is a new concept." So he did trigger injections, Bill, and he was amazing. And he referred me to a physical therapist whose name is Allison Poole. We're still friends to this day. And I saw her near my office. So I was seeing her 3 times a week. Now I'm still working. I can't even entertain the idea of leaving my career.
No.
I mean, I was making a really good salary. I carried the health insurance. I mean, you don't just leave that on the table.
No.
Except when the universe keeps bopping you over the head and saying, "Oh, post-polio isn't enough." I ended up with an abnormal mammogram. And so, but I used my visualization and my meditation, and I said, "Oh, no, this is not happening." And I knew about the work of Bernie Siegel through the years. Are you familiar with him?
Yes.
I incorporated the meditation, the visualization, and I visualized only healthy breast tissue. And I actually was able to dissolve the tumor. So at that point, I said, I got to leave my job. I'm not going to wait for something else to happen.
Right.
So I gave 6 weeks notice at that point. And I went through, with Allison, I went through intensive outpatient physical therapy. And she said to me, "You are not destined to live your life in a wheelchair. You need to reconnect your mind, your body, your spirit, your heart." She said, basically, think of it like you were broken, you were shattered into pieces.
Right.
And now we have to put all those fragments back together.
It was through serving as a college counselor that Mary discovered her affinity and skill for helping others. Inspired by the remarkable people who had helped her to this point, she began to do the same for others in vulnerable positions, including veterans returning from Vietnam. As Mary tells her story, notice how many people she remembers to thank by name. In the face of her hardships, this level of gratitude has no doubt fortified her as she's continued to press on. Now let's get back to our conversation to hear what came next for Mary McManus.
Something inside of me said, I'm at a crossroads in my life. I've got to figure out what I'm going to do. And in February of 2007, I got still and I prayed and I asked for divine guidance and I wrote a poem, and then many, 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 many poems. But it was a very powerful experience.
Incredible. And I believe somewhere in there, you tell me, you either read a poem or wrote a poem that involved running. You started, with given all your setbacks, somehow you became very interested in running. And then you go from, you might have the rest of your life in a wheelchair to this declaration that you were not just going to run, you were going to complete the Boston Marathon. So help us get our heads around that, Mary. How in the world did that happen?
Well, I'm still actually, sometimes when I sit and think about my journey, I'm still in awe.
What was I doing?
I'm truly, truly in awe, Bill.
Yeah.
So what happened was in February of 2007, as I say, it was the dark night of my mind, body, and soul, because I had no idea, did I have a future? Was this really going to progress? What should I do? And so I was all alone in my house, and all of a sudden, I had been reading about Bernie Siegel and Tony Robbins and
Yeah.
Wayne Dyer, the new age, which is
Yeah.
really the old age
Right.
thinking. So I have all these papers spread out on my table, and one of the newsletters from Lisa Nichols said that you should give gratitude in advance. So not only are we grateful for what is, but be grateful for what is yet to come. And one of the phrases was, I am so happy and grateful now that. All of a sudden, I completed the phrase, I'm so happy and grateful now that I can create. And I was, create what? I've had my twins.
Yeah.
My career has to end.
Yeah.
What am I going to create? And all of a sudden, this poem just poured out of me. And yes, it's called Running the Race. And in my mind's eye, in that poem, I saw myself winning a 10K race. I had no idea why. I'm sitting there saying, this is really strange. I was in my toe-up leg brace. I'm using a cane. And I said, why am I doing this? And I said, well, don't ask, just let it flow. And then the next, and in the Running the Race poem, Bill, it talked about gratitude. It talked about, I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
And then the next poem I wrote is called The Gift of Polio. And again, it talks about being grateful for the gifts in my life.
Yeah.
And they were all rhyming, like Dr. Seuss initially.
Right.
That it had Dr. Seuss's cadence. And so there I was, and I was beginning to visualize myself in a very different state. And when I wrote poetry, I literally felt no pain. It was transformative.
Wow.
And I had to have a pen and paper with me at all times. It was like a spigot was turned on in my soul, and it just kept flowing and flowing. And then my husband suggested that I start a small business. And he said, well, you write original poetry for different occasions. And it's something I kind of played with after my kids were born for their kindergarten and things. So he said, well, why don't you do original poetry for every occasion? So I started this New World greeting cards. Now I'm still at the VA. So this is February, March. Then by May, I knew May 25th, 2007, I just took a leap of faith. I took my retirement account and I just left.
Amazing.
And so I was writing poetry the whole time. And so this was the summer of 2007. In October of 2007, I just happened to meet this woman who was interested in having me come into Business Networking International, BNI, which is where you give referrals and you build your small business.
Okay.
So she's in my living room and we're talking about this. And she is an in-home personal trainer. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I don't care about my greeting card business. I'm wondering if I should hire a personal trainer. And so after we got through the business end of it, I said, Janine, do you think you could help me? Here's my story. So she said, well, use quoting Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
So I figured, well, what if I got to lose? I have everything to gain. So Janine and I started partnering together, Bill.
Wow.
And at first, I couldn't do much of anything. I couldn't do a push-up. I couldn't do the cardio evaluation. I was still, I was better than I was after having gone through PT, but I was still very deconditioned, very weak.
Sure.
And Janine said, let's go for it. So once a week, she would come to my house and I do weight training and squats and different things. And we worked together from October till February of 2008. And I was feeling better. And she had said to me at the time, you're too young. you're just too young to not be able to get off a sofa by yourself. And,
Yeah.
you're too young to be this deconditioned. So after 6 months, I was able to pass my initial assessment, and she asked me what my next goals were. And so I said, I'd love to be able to take a dance class. I took ballet when I was a child,
Yep.
before polio, and I want to feel free in my body. I want to, I'd really like to take a walk outside. I'd love to come out of this leg brace in these black polio shoes. And she's getting ready to leave, and I said, "Wait, I have one more goal." And she said, "Oh, okay." She's still holding on to her things, has her hand on the doorknob. And I said, "I want to run the Boston Marathon next year for Spalding Rehab. They have a race for rehab team." Now, Bill, she could have had a lot of responses to that.
Yeah. So you said next year. So this is because that's running April. You ran in April of 2009. Is that right?
Yeah.
So this is sometime early 2008.
Yeah, this is February of 2008.
So you have 14 months to go from that condition to running the Boston Marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's understand that, because and I think I'm fascinated by this because feats of athletic endurance are really interesting to me. I was never a long distance runner, but I did a lot of crazy cycling stuff, and it's everything from managing the pain of it, the discipline of it, the hours you put in, the very slow progress, the occasional minor injury that you have to get through. I can only imagine what that was like for you to go from that state to the ability to run 26.2 miles on a, by the way, not the easiest course in the world either. So how did that happen?
So we started out with a walk run where you walk for 4 minutes, you run for 30 or 4.5, 30. So it was starting out with a walk run. And Janine explained to me that it's just like walking, only faster.
Yeah.
And so she literally taught me how to run. And the other piece of this is that I told my husband and my daughter that I had a new goal. And they were like, wink, wink. Oh, sure. She's going to run Boston.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we don't want you to do it alone. So they said, we'll do it too. And so we all trained together, which really helped.
Yes.
Having people with you to go through the process really makes a difference. Plus, we had a team, the Race for Rehab team. So that all worked together to help. But ultimately, my husband was a runner before we had kids. He'd run up to 10Ks. My daughter was a self-proclaimed couch potato, but she thought this was a really cool way to get active.
Wow.
So we all trained together, but it was very, very slow.
Yeah.
You had to be really patient. I remember the first time I ran for 30 minutes consecutively. We just all celebrated, that I could do that. And it was, from a 5K to my daughter and I did the Tufts 10K race. We did the Hyannis half. And we just kept building and building and building. And I must say that, and I was writing poetry, I was visualizing. So I just kept my sights on the goal, which was Marathon Monday.
Mary once again has me thinking about gratitude here as she introduces a concept I hadn't before considered: giving gratitude in advance. And thinking about it, it feels almost like a very deliberate and intentional form of optimism. And I really like it. One thing Mary's particularly grateful for in the present is that she discovered poetry and the sense of flow she experiences when composing, all the way to not feeling pain while she writes. And imagine being her physical therapist, helping Mary with the most basic physical movements, then being told that she wanted to run the Boston Marathon. Amazing. Now, to our final segment of this Blue Sky Conversation with Mary McManus. So for people who don't know, the Boston Marathon is run on Patriots Day, which is a state holiday in Maine and Massachusetts. And it's in April. And so you can have, It can be kind of warm. It can be snowing. So as you and one of the challenges there, if you live in the Northeast and you're in Greater Boston, some of your peak training is in lousy conditions in January, February, March. So I can imagine as you're getting closer to that race, you start. Did the doubts ever creep in? And then what was that like as you're like, oh my gosh, it's in 3 weeks. I'm going to do this.
Well, interesting about the doubts. There were moments, there
Sure.
were meltdowns,
Yep.
which is true for anybody training for a marathon,
Sure.
but
Yep.
it had a little extra kick,
Yeah.
for me. But for the most part, Bill, I knew I was going to do it. I never doubted
Wow.
that I was going to be able to cover the 26.2 miles.
Right.
I trusted Janine, my trainer.
Yep.
We had a coach through Spalding,
Yep.
Dominic D'Amico, and he was amazing. And I just knew I was meant to do this. And
Incredible.
the poetry, the visualization, the meditation, and yeah,
Yeah.
I just knew it. Was it easy? Oh God, no.
Yeah.
But it was something that was just so incredibly transformative.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Keep in mind when I was growing up, I was Easy Out Alper. That was my maiden name.
Yep.
And so to be out there and people absolutely wrap themselves around my story.
Yes.
I mean, they were absolutely 100% on board. And I was, even though when I'd finish last in a race, they would wait for me and they'd blow the air horn and I was celebrated. So
Yes.
all of that really fueled my journey. And it was so healing. It was healing from the abuse. It was healing from the polio, from the, being bullied, all of it.
Yep.
It was just such a profoundly healing experience. And of course, anybody who's been in Boston or run Boston, there's truly nothing like it.
I was just going to say I have not run it, but I've been a spectator, and yes, it's not an easy course, but the fans are unbelievable at all these different stretches, and it varies. You get the Wellesley students and you get the people closer to the finish line. And famously, there's Heartbreak Hill in the Boston Marathon around mile 20-21, which is, it's not like this crazy hill, but the placement of it is very difficult in the race. I mean, as you're getting that much closer to the finish line, I can imagine it was getting emotional and right?
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh, my gosh, Phil.
Yeah.
I still get goosebumps
Yeah,
thinking
I'm
about
sure.
it. Our trainer back in the day, this was before the bombing, she met us on Heartbreak Hill.
Yeah.
So
right. You could do that. Yep.
She went in with us, and my son was at Cleveland Circle.
Yep.
And so he walked in. We were walking more at that point.
Sure.
So he came in with us. There were people that we knew all along the course. My coach, Dominic, met us on Heartbreak Hill, and he was crying.
Yeah, of course.
To see me on Heartbreak Hill. And he said, go get your medal. And it was the ugly cry actually started on Heartbreak Hill.
Yes.
And then there's a turn you make a right onto Hereford Street and a left onto Boylston. And I was gone the whole way to the finish line. And yeah.
Yeah, I know people who've been in the race where someone would yell something from the crowd or something that, something that's on their t-shirt, and actually the emotions become almost as hard as the physical issues because you've worked so hard for this thing. Okay, so that marathon was now almost 16 years ago. Tell us about what your life's been like since then. And I know you've continued with challenges, and you've continued with your writing and your poetry. So what's your life been like since then, Mary? And how do you keep this positivity about you?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's after the Boston Marathon and with running, I think positivity and gratitude and optimism, it's just a wonderful way, the endorphins, I mean, chemically, the changes that happen when you run, when you're out in nature.
Yep.
So I had to take a break from running. I went back, I needed more trigger injections.
Yep.
And so I didn't actually know if I would continue running, but the bug bit me hard.
Yeah.
And I had to get back to it. So I got back to running and ran until did races and stuff and really just loved it. And then
Yes.
in 2011, my brother's son ended his life.
Ugh.
And that really did me in.
Sure. Sure.
That was really, really hard. And I stopped running, which is what I needed the most.
Yeah.
But
right.
I just, I don't know. I just couldn't get out there and it was just a really, really tough time. But then in 2013, I decided, okay, I haven't come this far to only come this far.
Yep.
And so I reunited with my Spalding Race for Rehab teammates at the Mandarin Hotel. We get invited every year as alumni.
Yep.
And this is 2013. So there we are. And we're looking, fortunately, I was not looking down on Boylston Street, but we felt the explosions. And we were very lucky, very blessed.
Yeah.
And we were able to evacuate safely and get back to our car. So that was like an unbelievable trauma, but it actually got me motivated to get back into running, to be taking good care of myself.
Yep.
And because I was affiliated with Spalding, they had just opened their new hospital and they were taking care of the bombing survivors.
Ugh.
And they also had a therapeutic pool for the community. So I got into doing aquatics and really building myself back up again.
Wow.
So that was 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
2014, I blew out my left knee. I kind of overdid it. Bill.
Yeah, it happens.
Okay, I didn't kind of
it
overdo
happens.
it. I overdid it. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Blew out my left knee. I went back to the polio clinic and I was told I never should have started running.
Yeah.
I had to stop running. The MRI showed that there was no cartilage, the gastroc muscle had atrophied, on and on.
Yeah.
It went. And he said, but I know you're probably not going to stop running, but cap it at a 5K and prepare for total knee replacement in a few years. So I went to a physical therapist that he referred me to. And, you know, it's really interesting, Bill. I've had all these incredible therapists.
Yeah.
I mean, I only had one bad one, and that was in 2015. And I said, oh no, this is not going to work. And miraculously, I found a chiropractor and he partnered with me and we healed the left leg. I actually grew a new gastroc muscle with KT tape and doing gastroc strengthening exercises, visualization, mind body connection. And I got back out on the roads and ran the Bermuda 2016, 2017, and 2018 half marathons.
Jeez.
And then thank you. And then I went back to 5Ks because, you know, that was good. I was happy.
Yeah.
And then COVID hits and I got the second COVID vaccine. And by the way, I was so glad to hear you and I'm forgetting his name, your previous guest.
Is that Carabelle?
Yes.
Talking about the vaccines.
Yes. And I was so grateful to hear you say that, you know, you can say this is safe for everybody.
Right.
You can't guarantee that somebody is not going to have a bad reaction.
Right.
Well, I had a bad reaction, but I did it for the common good.
Right.
I mean, I'd do it all over again.
Right.
Because
especially someone who's been through polio, which was cured by a vaccine or prevented. Yeah.
Yes. So I had a really, 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 really bad reaction to the vaccine. And it was almost on the border of Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is where the nerves and the muscles are not communicating. And
gosh.
So that lasted but I was writing poetry. And I did write 2 books during the pandemic, Hope is a Garden, Poems and Essays from the Pandemic, and Into the Light, Emerging from the 2020 Pandemic.
Yep.
So I was writing poetry and I was using, I can only imagine if I didn't have all these techniques at my disposal, how much worse I would have been. finally, at the end of 2022, my daughter said, okay, enough. You have not come this far to only go this far. And so I decided that I needed to push myself. So 2023, I did a virtual 5K and it felt really, really good. It also, God smiled on me because it was a 55-degree day
That's just
on
right.
New Year's Day,
Yeah, just
which
right.
was great. Yeah. So I got back on the roads and my daughter said, you need a really big epic goal for when you turn 70. I said, well, what? She said, well, I think you should go back to Bermuda and do the 10K. So I trained for the Bermuda 10K. Unfortunately, I got COVID in December of 2023.
Sheesh.
But I still started the race, Bill. I decided I was trained for it. Whatever happened, happened. At mile 3.06, my body said, okay, girlie, you're done.
We're done.
I got to ride back to the starting line. And then on May the 4th, may the 4th be with you, of 2024, I said, well, I'm well trained. It was a beautiful day. I just went out and I did the 10K distance again. So I'm back to training, doing my strength training, and, challenging myself. And I feel so blessed and grateful. And, 71 years young, and I'm still going strong.
Mary, what a story. It's so inspiring, and you've been a great supporter of the work I'm doing, and I'm so glad to have you on because so many of us, we all face setbacks. That's life. We all have challenges. That's life. It's really, you're dealt a tough hand. It's how you play it. And listening to, from the very earliest ages right through to a couple of years ago, the repeated challenges that you've faced and how you've taken them on, it's incredibly inspiring. And so I encourage people to check out your books and your poetry. And I can't wait to see what you do next, because I'm sure there's more goals ahead for Mary McManus before you've come too far to just come this far.
I'm going to go the half marathon distance again this year.
All right. We will be watching for your progress and cheering you on wherever you wind up running.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Thank you so much. And I feel truly blessed and grateful that I could share my journey with you and with your network, because I think we need to let people know what's possible.
Absolutely.
And also that it's not about the setbacks, but it's about that resilience, and it's about getting up and you keep moving forward and you find a way. And sometimes you really dig deep in order to get to where you need to go. But we all have that capacity. And when we listen to other people's stories, I think that really helps to keep that flame lit, especially during these times where everything feels like, where's the light?
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much, Mary. Appreciate your time and for all that you put into this world. It's really inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
There's so much to take away from Mary's life reflections. From my own experience, I'd underscore what she has to say about the health and emotional benefits of exercise. It's always been a huge help for me, and the more research I read on the secrets to a long and healthy life, a constant always seems to be the importance of staying physically active. And whether you run a marathon or perhaps plan one for your future, I do recommend attending one as a spectator whenever you need a pick-me-up. These are life-affirming events, which made the 2013 Boston bombing such a heartbreaking tragedy. But resilient as we humans are, that race came back in style in 2014, and like today's guest, continues to inspire us these many years later. I hope you enjoyed this Blue Sky conversation with Mary McManus. Before you go, please leave us a rating or review. These help us make the show better and help new listeners find us. While you're at it, you might want to subscribe to Blue Sky wherever you get your podcasts, sign up for the Blue Sky Weekend newsletter at theoptimisminstitute.com, and follow us on social media. This and all Blue Sky episodes are made possible by the editing and mixing done by the outstanding team at Sound On, Sound Off. You can learn more about their work at soundonsoundoff.com. And all graphic design and cover art for Blue Sky and the Optimism Institute are provided by Crush Graphics. That's Crush with a K, if you'd like to check out more of their work at crushgraphics.com. Until next time, I'm the founder of the Optimism Institute and host of Blue Sky, Bill Burke, and I thank you for listening.